chosen one, hear this word carefully, for the days ahead will not be neutral. They will not be mild. They will not be safe by default. The days coming upon the earth will be days of separation, days of testing, days where what once sustained many will suddenly turn toxic. What once felt harmless will become dangerous. What once appeared nourishing will reveal itself as poison. In ancient times, when judgment approached a nation, the land itself reflected the condition of the people. Wells ran dry. Crops failed. Bread lost its strength, not because food itself was evil, but because the source had been corrupted. So it will be again. For when a world disconnects from the source of life, even what it consumes becomes death. You are called, chosen, not because you are immune, but because you are warned. Chosen does not mean sheltered from the storm. It means instructed on how to survive it. And survival in the days ahead will not come from abundance, knowledge, money, systems, or crowds. Survival will come from discernment. Everything else will be poison. The world will offer you many tables. Tables of information, tables of pleasure, tables of outrage, tables of fear, tables of false comfort. They will look full. They will look appealing. They will look normal. But many of them will be laced with confusion, compromise, and spiritual toxins. You will be tempted to eat simply because everyone else is eating. But chosen ones are not called to follow appetites. They are called to follow truth. In the days ahead, not everything that is popular will be safe. Not everything that is legal will be right. Not everything that is celebrated will be life-giving. Some things will feed your body while starving your soul. Some things will excite your mind while poisoning your spirit. Some things will promise peace but deliver bondage. And so the question is not, what can I consume, but what can sustain me? In Scripture, there were moments when God's people survived, not by what they had, but by what they refused to eat. There were foods forbidden, paths avoided, voices rejected. Survival required restraint. Survival required obedience. Survival required trust in something unseen rather than dependence on what was visible. So what will keep you alive? Not the noise of the age, but the voice of God. Not constant connection, but holy separation. Not endless information, but eternal wisdom. Not fear-driven survivalism, but faith-driven obedience. In the coming days, many will panic because what they trusted will fail them. Systems will shake. Assurances will collapse. Experts will contradict one another. And people will run from source to source, trying to stay alive by consuming more of what is already killing them. But you were not called to run with the crowd. You were called to stand when others fall. There is a bread the world cannot poison. There is a water the world cannot contaminate. There is a light that does not flicker when darkness thickens. These are not metaphors for comfort. They are realities for survival. Truth will keep you alive. Righteousness will keep you alive. Prayer will keep you alive. Obedience will keep you alive. In the days ahead, distraction will be deadly. Compromise will be lethal. Spiritual numbness will be fatal. You cannot afford to be half awake. You cannot afford to treat sacred things casually. You cannot afford to drink from every stream just because you are thirsty. Because not every stream carries life. Some carry sickness. Some carry deception. Some carry slow death. You will need to know the difference. That is why you must guard what enters you, what you watch, what you listen to, what you repeat, what you believe. The enemy does not always attack by force. Sometimes he feeds. He feeds lies dressed as truth. He feeds fear disguised as wisdom. He feeds comfort that weakens the soul. But there is a remnant that will not bow to poison provision. A people who will say, I will not eat what destroys me. People who will choose daily bread from heaven rather than delicacies from a fallen world. These are the ones who will remain standing. These are the ones who will endure. These are the ones who will live. Chosen one. The call is not to hide from the world, but to refuse its poison, to walk through the days ahead with clean hands, clear eyes, and a guarded heart, to stay anchored when everything else drifts, to stay faithful when faithfulness costs you comfort. The days ahead will reveal what is real. They will expose what is false. They will strip away illusions. And many will discover too late that what they depended on was never meant to sustain life. But you have been warned. And warning is mercy. So choose carefully what you consume. Choose carefully who you listen to. Choose carefully what shapes your thoughts and feeds your spirit. Because in the days ahead, survival will not belong to the strongest, the richest, or the loudest, but to the faithful. Everything else will be poisoned. But what comes from God will keep you alive. And if you remain in that, you will not merely survive, you will endure, stand, and overcome. The days ahead will not allow neutrality. They will not allow spiritual laziness or casual belief. A dividing line is forming even now, though many do not yet see it. What once existed side by side will begin to separate truth from imitation, life from decay, light from darkness. In times like these, separation is not cruelty. It is clarity. It is the revealing of what has always been beneath the surface. In history, every season of shaking produced a season of distinction. When pressure increased, true foundations became visible. Those rooted in truth endured, while those built on convenience collapsed. The coming days will function the same way. They will expose motives, priorities, and loyalties. People will discover that what they once trusted for safety cannot protect them anymore. Comfort will lose its power. Familiar routines will no longer bring peace. What felt stable will begin to shift. And many will feel unprepared. Separation does not always arrive dramatically. Sometimes it begins quietly through choices that seem small. What you allow into your mind. What you excuse in your heart. What you tolerate in your life. These choices form paths. And paths eventually lead to destinations. In the days ahead, the consequences of these paths will become undeniable. What once seemed harmless will reveal its cost. What once felt optional will become essential. Many will resist this separation because it is uncomfortable. They will try to blend, to remain connected to everything and everyone. But blending will no longer be possible. The environment itself will demand alignment. Truth will not coexist peacefully with deception. Faith will not thrive in compromise. The more the world pulls away from what is eternal, more incompatible it becomes with those who remain anchored. This is why the coming separation is not about isolation but devotion. It is not about rejecting people, but rejecting poison. It is not about fear, but about survival. The separation is necessary because what is mixed cannot endure. Purity of source determines longevity of life. When sources become polluted, survival requires discernment. There will be voices insisting that nothing has changed, that the warnings are exaggerated, that everyone will be fine if they simply adapt. But adaptation without discernment leads to absorption, and absorption into a corrupted system eventually destroys what was once alive. The pressure to conform will increase, not always through force, but through subtle normalization. What was once unthinkable will become acceptable. What was once questioned will be celebrated, and those who resist will be labeled outdated, extreme, or divisive. Yet division is already here. It is simply being revealed. The separation will also uncover a deeper truth. Survival will no longer depend on strength or intelligence, but on alignment. Those aligned with truth will find stability even in chaos. Those aligned with deception will experience confusion even in abundance. Peace will no longer come from external conditions, but from internal anchoring. This is why the days ahead will feel intense. The pace will accelerate. Decisions will feel heavier. The margin for error will shrink. Delayed obedience will become dangerous. Half commitment will no longer sustain spiritual life. The days will demand clarity, and clarity requires choice. But within this separation is mercy. To be warned is to be loved. To be called out is to be protected. The exposure of poison is not meant to harm but to preserve life. The separating line is not drawn to exclude but to identify what leads to survival. Those who recognize this will not panic. They will adjust. They will simplify. They will return to what is pure, true, and life-giving. They will choose depth over noise, truth over trend, obedience over approval. And in doing so, they will not only endure the days ahead, they will stand steady while others stumble. The days ahead will separate, but they will also refine. And those who understand this will discover that separation is not loss, it is preservation. Being chosen has never meant being spared from difficulty. It has always meant being entrusted with responsibility. Those who are chosen are not lifted above hardship. They are given sight before it arrives. Warning is not favoritism, it is preparation. And in the days ahead, preparation will be the difference between endurance and collapse. Many assume that being chosen guarantees protection from pain, confusion, or loss. But history tells a different story. Those who were chosen were often the first to face resistance, misunderstanding, and pressure. They were called to stand while others blended in. They were asked to trust when evidence was thin and to obey when obedience carried a cost. Being chosen meant carrying a burden long before carrying a reward. Warning is the clear sign of care. When danger approaches, silence is not kindness. Instruction is. The chosen are warned not because they are stronger, but because they are meant to survive. Survival requires awareness, and awareness requires truth. Even when truth is uncomfortable, in the days ahead, many will be caught off guard, not because signs were absent, but because they were ignored. Distraction dulls perception. Comfort weakens urgency. When everything seems manageable, warning feels unnecessary. But when change accelerates and pressure increases, those without preparation will scramble, while those who heeded instruction will stand with clarity. Being warned also means being accountable. Once truth is revealed, it demands a response. You cannot claim ignorance after instruction. You cannot pretend neutrality after clarity. The chosen are responsible for what they know. This is why warning carries weight. It calls for adjustment, not admiration. It is not given to inspire fear, but to provoke readiness. Shelter can create weakness if it removes the need for discernment. True protection is not the absence of danger, but the presence of wisdom. The chosen are not hidden from storms. They are taught how to navigate them. They are trained to recognize false refuge and avoid temporary safety that leads to long-term destruction. In coming days, false shelter will multiply. Promises of security will be offered in exchange for compromise. Many will trade truth for comfort. Assuming peace is worth the cost. But peace built on surrender to deception cannot endure. When pressure increases, false shelter collapses, leaving those inside exposed and unprepared. Warning sharpens discernment. It trains the mind to question, the heart to examine, and the spirit to remain alert. The chosen are not those who panic at every sign, but those who recognize patterns. They see repetition in history. They sense alignment between cause and consequence. They understand that decline rarely arrives Suddenly, it advances through stages. This is why being warned is a privilege. It allows time to realign, to strengthen foundations, and to release attachments that will not survive the coming pressure. It allows for internal preparation before external disruption. Those who respond to warning early will not need to rush later. Yet many resist warning because it disrupts comfort. It challenges assumptions. It exposes vulnerability. But comfort cannot be the priority when survival is at stake. Temporary ease must yield to long-term endurance. Warning is not meant to remove peace, but to root it deeper. Those who accept warning will not look like the majority. They will simplify their lives. They will guard their inputs. They will refine their priorities. They will build inner strength rather than relying on external systems. And when shaking begins, they will not ask why. They will know they were prepared for this moment. Being chosen means being warned. And being warned means being loved enough to be told the truth before it is too late. What the world offers will not always appear dangerous. In fact, much of it will look helpful, reasonable, even necessary. That is what makes it poisonous. Poison is rarely presented as destruction. It is presented as nourishment. It promises relief, progress, safety, and peace. And many will consume it without suspicion, assuming that if something is common, approved, and widely accepted, it must be harmless. But history shows that what destroys a society often arrives disguised as its solution. The danger of poison is not only in its strength, but in its subtlety. It works slowly, quietly, and internally. It does not always cause immediate pain. Instead, it weakens over time, dulling senses, altering priorities, and numbing resistance. By the time the effects are visible, the source is deeply embedded. This is how spiritual poison operates. It does not announce itself as false. It presents itself as practical. In the days ahead, the world will offer answers to every fear, solutions to every anxiety, explanations for every crisis. These answers will sound intelligent. They will be backed by experts, repeated by media, and reinforced through culture. But not every answer is rooted in truth, are rooted in control. Some are rooted in convenience. Some are rooted in compromise. And those who consume them without discernment will slowly lose their ability to recognize what is real. Poison reshapes appetite. After enough exposure, what once felt wrong begins to feel normal. What once disturbed the conscience becomes acceptable. This is one of the most dangerous effects. The issue is no longer external pressure, but internal agreement. When values shift quietly, resistance disappears. People stop asking whether something is right and start asking whether it is permitted. The world's tables will be full. Information will be endless. Entertainment will be constant. Distraction will be readily available, and all of it will claim to improve life. But fullness is not the same as nourishment. Stimulation is not the same as strength. Constant intake without discernment leads to internal decay. Another mark of poison is dependency. What weakens you also makes you reliant on it. The more it drains, the more it convinces you that you need it. This cycle traps many. They sense emptiness but continue consuming what caused it. They feel unrest but increase the dosage. Over time, freedom erodes and clarity disappears. In contrast, what gives life strengthens independence rather than dependency. Truth does not enslave, it frees. Righteousness does not weaken, it fortifies. What comes from God produces clarity, not confusion. Peace, not numbness. Strength, not exhaustion. The danger ahead is not merely external threats, but internal corruption. When minds are overwhelmed and hearts are compromised, even obvious danger goes unnoticed. That is why discernment is not optional. It is survival. Discernment is the ability to recognize what something is producing, not just what it is promising. The poison of the age will promise unity but produce division. It will promise safety but create fear. It will promise progress but erode morality. It will promise freedom but increase control. These contradictions will confuse many, but those who observe outcomes rather than slogans will recognize the truth. There will be pressure to consume without question, to accept without examination, to align without conviction. But survival will require restraint. It will require the courage to say no when yes is easier. It will require the discipline to step away from what is celebrated but destructive. Not everything that feeds the body strengthens the soul. Not everything that excites the mind protects the heart. And not everything that is praised will preserve life. In the days ahead, many will discover too late that what they relied on was slowly killing what mattered most. But those who choose carefully will remain clear. Those who refuse poison will retain strength. And those who seek truth over comfort will find that what sustains them cannot be taken away. Survival in the days ahead will not be measured by what people possess, but by what they perceive. Abundance will no longer guarantee safety. Knowledge will no longer guarantee wisdom. Access will no longer guarantee understanding. Many will have more than ever before and still be unprepared for what is coming. The determining factor will be discernment, the ability to see clearly, choose rightly, and refuse what destroys life even when it appears beneficial. Throughout history, collapse has often occurred in times of abundance, not scarcity. When resources are plentiful, vigilance declines. When information is abundant, truth becomes harder to identify. When options multiply, focus weakens. People begin to rely on quantity rather than clarity. They assume that having more will protect them. When in reality, excess without discernment overwhelms the mind and weakens resolve. In the days ahead, information will increase, but wisdom will be rare. Voices will multiply, but truth will be drowned out by volume. Experts will disagree. Authorities will contradict themselves. And those who depend on external validation for certainty will be pulled in every direction. Discernment is what allows a person to remain steady when consensus collapses. Abundance creates noise. Discernment creates focus. Without discernment, abundance becomes a liability. Too many inputs blur priorities. Too many opinions paralyze decision-making. Too many options erode conviction. People will chase solutions endlessly, assuming the next resource, the next update, or the next authority will finally bring clarity. But clarity does not come from accumulation. It comes from alignment. Discernment also protects against manipulation. Those who cannot distinguish truth from deception are easily controlled by fear. Fear narrows perception and drives people to accept solutions they would normally reject. When fear governs choices, survival instincts override moral judgment. Discernment interrupts this process by restoring perspective. It allows one to see beyond immediate pressure and evaluate long-term consequences. Another danger of abundance is dependence. Systems designed to provide convenience can also create vulnerability. When people rely entirely on structures they do not understand or control, collapse becomes catastrophic. Discernment teaches balance, how to use systems without being enslaved by them, how to prepare without panicking, and how to adapt without surrendering principles. The days ahead will expose the difference between intelligence and wisdom. Intelligence gathers data. Wisdom interprets meaning. Intelligence knows facts. Wisdom understands direction. Intelligence reacts. Wisdom responds. Discernment is the bridge between knowledge and wisdom. Without it, even the most informed individuals will make destructive choices. Discernment is cultivated, not inherited. It grows through humility, reflection, and a willingness to question assumptions. It requires silence in a noisy world and patience in an urgent culture. Those who rush to conclusions will miss truth. Those who slow down to observe patterns will recognize it. The pressure to choose quickly will intensify. Decisions will be framed as emergencies. Delays will be labeled dangerous. But not every urgent call requires immediate compliance. Discernment creates the ability to pause, assess, and choose with clarity rather than fear. It recognizes when speed is being used as a tool of control. Survival will also require the ability to say no to opportunities, to offers, to narratives that promise safety at the cost of integrity. Discernment strengthens resolve. It anchors identity. It reminds individuals who they are and what they stand for when compromise is presented as necessity. In the end, those who survive will not be those with the most resources, but those with the clearest vision. They will not be those who followed every trend, but those who understood the times. Discernment will not only preserve life, it will preserve purpose when everything else is uncertain. What comes from God is not vulnerable to contamination. Everything else can be altered, diluted, corrupted, or weaponized, but what proceeds from God remains intact no matter the environment. This is why in times of widespread confusion and instability, the only reliable source of sustenance is not external provision, but divine truth. When systems fail and assurances collapse, what is rooted in God does not lose its power to sustain life. Truth is not merely information. It is alignment with reality as God defines it. In the days ahead, many will know facts yet remain confused because facts without truth lack direction. Truth stabilizes the mind. It brings coherence where chaos tries to dominate. It does not change with circumstances or pressure. That is why truth is life-giving. It provides a fixed point when everything else is shifting. Righteousness functions the same way. It is not moral perfection, but right alignment. It keeps the inner life ordered even when the outer world is disordered. Righteousness protects the conscience from erosion. When compromise becomes normalized, righteousness preserves clarity. It acts as an internal compass preventing drift. Without it, people may survive physically but decay spiritually, losing the very strength needed to endure. Prayer is another source that cannot be corrupted. It bypasses systems, noise, and intermediaries. It is not dependent on permission, access, or stability. Prayer strengthens perception. It sharpens discernment. It restores peace without numbing awareness. In times when fear is used to control, prayer breaks the grip of panic by reconnecting the soul to a higher authority. Obedience is often misunderstood as restriction, but in reality, it is protection. Obedience narrows choices, but it widens safety. It keeps individuals within boundaries designed for preservation. Many disasters occur not because guidance was absent, but because it was ignored. Obedience protects from paths that appear reasonable but lead to destruction. It preserves life by preventing exposure to unnecessary danger. These sources, truth, righteousness, prayer, obedience, do not promise comfort, but they promise survival. They do not eliminate difficulty, but they provide endurance. They do not shield from pressure, but they prevent collapse under it. This is why they are essential in the days ahead. Everything else can be compromised. These cannot. The world will offer substitutes. Moral flexibility instead of righteousness, meditation without surrender instead of prayer. Personal truth instead of divine truth, convenience instead of obedience. These substitutes may feel empowering at first, but they lack sustaining power. They weaken resolve and erode discipline. Over time, they leave individuals vulnerable, exposed, and exhausted. What comes from God strengthens rather than drains. It produces resilience rather than dependency. It sharpens rather than dulls awareness. Even when circumstances worsen, those anchored in these sources remain internally stable. They are not driven by headlines or shaken by rumors. Their peace does not come from denial, but from trust. In the days ahead, many will discover that what they relied on was fragile. Careers, reputations, Institutions and networks will fail to provide security. When that happens, those who have cultivated divine sustenance will not scramble. They will already be anchored. Their strength will not be borrowed from circumstances, but drawn from within. Choosing these sources requires intention. They are not consumed accidentally. They demand discipline in a distracted world. They require humility in a culture that celebrates self-sufficiency. But the cost of neglecting them will be far greater than the cost of embracing them. When everything else becomes unstable, what comes from God remains firm. When everything else is poisoned, what comes from Him preserves life. And those who choose this sustenance will not merely endure the days ahead, they will remain whole within them. There will always be a remnant. Not the loudest, not the largest, not the most visible, but the most faithful. When pressure increases and compromise becomes the easy path, a smaller group will choose restraint over acceptance and truth over comfort. These are not people without fear. They are people who refuse to let fear decide for them. Their endurance will not come from strength of personality, but from depth of conviction. Falling away rarely begins with rebellion. It begins with neglect. A guarded heart becomes casual. Discernment becomes tolerance. Conviction becomes preference. Over time, the line between right and acceptable blurs, and what once would have been resisted is now excused. This is how many are lost, not suddenly, but gradually. The remnant survives because it remains attentive when others become numb. The faithful will appear different, not because they seek distinction, but because they refuse distortion. They will not echo every opinion. They will not absorb every trend. They will not adjust truth to fit the moment. This will cost them approval. It may cost them opportunities. It may cost them relationships. But it will preserve their clarity. And clarity is priceless in times of confusion. While others chase relevance, the remnant will pursue faithfulness. While others react emotionally, the remnant will respond thoughtfully. While others rush, the remnant will remain anchored. This steadiness will frustrate those who rely on chaos to maintain control. But it will also attract those who are searching for stability. Guarding the heart will be essential. What is allowed inside eventually shapes behavior. The faithful will be selective, not fearful. They will understand that constant exposure to fear, outrage, and deception weakens the soul. They will limit what drains them and prioritize what strengthens them. This discipline will look restrictive to outsiders, but it will function as preservation. The remnant will not be perfect, but it will be repentant. When correction is needed, they will respond rather than resist. Pride hardens, humility preserves. This posture keeps the heart alive and responsive. It prevents stagnation and drift. Those who endure are not those who never fail, but those who return quickly when they do. As others fall away, pressure will increase on those who remain. Isolation will test resolve. Mockery will test patience. Opposition will test love. But endurance is forged in resistance. The faithful will discover that what once felt like weakness, dependence on God, has become their greatest strength. They will not measure success by survival alone, but by integrity. To endure while losing one's soul is not victory. The remnant understands this. They choose faithfulness even when it costs. They value obedience over outcome. And in doing so, they preserve what truly matters. In times of collapse, the remnant becomes a witness without trying to be. Their calm exposes panic. Their clarity exposes confusion. Their consistency exposes compromise. They do not need to announce who they are. Their endurance speaks for itself. The days ahead will reveal many things. They will reveal what is shallow and what is rooted, what is temporary and what is eternal. And while many will fall away under pressure, the faithful remnant will remain. Not because the days were easy, but because their foundation was firm. Those who guard their hearts refuse poison, and remain anchored in truth will stand. They will endure. And in the midst of uncertainty, they will become living proof that faithfulness is not only possible but sustaining.